Yeah. Well, probably wait until she gets going.
Meeting of WSAFCA come to order.
Push your green button. Your green light. There it is.
Yeah. The meeting of WSAFCA come to order. First order of business, agenda approval.
I would like to make one change to the agenda, and that would be to move item 9 off of the consent agenda to a regular item. And I would move for approval of the agenda as corrected, as amended.
Second. Been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as corrected. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Next item is report on a closed session.
The board met in closed session on 2 agenda items. The first is a conference with real property negotiator, and no action was taken under that agenda item. The second is conference with legal counsel over 4 pieces of existing litigation. And in that regard, the board approved settlements with regard to each of the 4 reference cases: Baxter versus WSAFCA, WSAFCA versus South River LLC, WSAFCA versus McDonald, and WSAFCA versus Yokoyama. That's it.
The next item is item number 3, public comment on matters not on the agenda. We have no requests. Approval of April 21st, 2016 minutes. Need a motion?
I'd move approval.
And I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Agenda, monthly year-to-date revenue expenses.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. This report is for the month of March 2016. The agency had a starting cash position, combined cash position of $14.9 million. No appreciable revenue was received for the period. Expenses for the month included a bond payment for the new 2015 bond, distribution to the O&M agencies of $458,000. The largest amount of activity, of course, was in the Southport project, which spent $8.5 million. Those expenses included sizable land acquisitions, a PG&E tariff agreement, and construction payments on Village Parkway. The ending position for the month is $5.1 million. In the progress report, staff mentions that the cash position as of May 12th is $7.6 million, and that represents a transfer from the city, or contribution from the city, from Measure V of $4.5 million. That will be reported out in the April report. We're expecting the second installment of the flood assessment to arrive probably the last week of May, and it'll be $1.something million. And also, we're working on a true-up payment with the state, which will be approximately $2 million. We'll probably start seeing the paperwork for that in the first couple weeks of June. That ends the report for this month.
That's it?
That's it.
Thank you very much. The next item is the consent agenda.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda, which now is items 6, 7, and 8.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved for items 6, 7, and 8. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Public hearing.
No, we go back to 9.
Go to 9.
Go to
Go
9.
back to 9. Item 9. I'm just cutting you out, Paul, that's all.
President and members of the board, item 9 requests an appropriation of $1.36 million for the relocation of the cell tower that's located presently at the corner of Linden and South River Road to a location interior to that. As you know, they went through a significant process through planning and the city council appeal process to identify this site. They built a temporary road across from the existing cell tower site to the new cell tower site. They placed the foundation, and as of yesterday, most of the tower was, at least the tower itself, not all the carriers, was in place. And so we're looking for an appropriation to start dealing with the invoices that we expect to be receiving from them. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have about that.
Well, I don't have any questions, particularly to Paul. You know, on our pre-board briefing, we had some discussions on it, but I would, you know, like to see a little more detail and a little more information as to the, you know, justifications of the various costs. And you know, I understand there can be invoicing or whatnot, but perhaps Crown Castle or others could, you know, bring forth to us some little more detail as to where that's at. And I would ask that we possibly continue this item until next month, and take it up that time with a fresh report and information.
I would support Tom in his idea, because, I mean, I do think we need to look harder at what the figures are. And we need to, you know, look at what the cost of new equipment is, especially in comparison to what the old equipment was. So I think that that's something legitimate, and we should really try to, you know, save as much money as we possibly can for the ratepayers.
Paul, would it be helpful if we had like an interim authorization, if, you know, there were invoices that came through some point, or?
Well, thus far, the carriers have been waiting for us to get an appropriation. They haven't submitted any invoices. I think I say in the staff report, the first 2 phases of due diligence and design are likely they're complete. Together, those two amount to about $170,000. But either, you know, one way or another, if you make an appropriation, I'm not sure that I'll get invoices right away. If you don't, certainly I can communicate with the carrier about the concerns of the board in terms of the costs. and try to figure out the schedule. They've been flexible, essentially. They know that they're putting out the cost up front to, put in the new cell tower. But they've also, expressed to me that they can deliver invoices in a schedule that is more appropriate or fits our cash flow needs. So just to let you know that.
Okay. Well, then based on that, I would like to, go forward with that motion that we continue till next month and ask staff to come back with, some more detail as to specific costs.
Okay.
Well, it's not only that, but I mean, it's also, the equipment that they've had there in the past, they've undoubtedly depreciated and done all these other things. Now you've got new equipment coming in, and why should the ratepayers have to pay the elevated levels of new equipment, even though we are asking them to move? So, I just, maybe there's something there that can save a few pennies, I don't know. But at the same time, I mean, I think it's an issue worth taking a look at.
Okay.
Okay.
The motion is that we provide an access to getting the material and everything together to show us the costs that are coming down the pike with it. And if you would supply that to the board as soon as you get it, we'd appreciate it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Public hearing?
None.
None. Regular agenda? None.
None. Or just finished.
WSAFCA project updates.
Good morning, President Denton and members of the board. I'll just go over a few of the highlights from the progress report that was contained in your packet. For the Southport Levee Improvement Project, the subsequent EIR for the Borrow 1 site is out. The draft EIR is out for public review. That comment period closes next Wednesday, the 25th. Following receipt of those comments, we'll be putting a package together to bring to the board, hopefully at the June meeting, for certification of that EIR. For some of the other environmental permits, we received the draft stream bed alteration agreement from California Department of Fish and Wildlife. That would have been last week. We're preparing responses or comments to the draft report, which we plan to submit to Fish and Wildlife by this Friday. We've received a request from the Corps and the State Historic Preservation Officer to develop a subsurface survey plan to support cultural and historic resources. That plan has been submitted to the Corps for its review. We anticipate response, comments from the Corps next week, and we plan to implement that subsurface survey work beginning 1st of June, hopefully maybe a little before. And in support, or because of the subsurface explorations, we're looking at somewhat of a delay in award or advertisement and award of a construction contract, probably on the order of 2 months, 2.5 months. So that adjustment should be made to the schedule that's included in the progress report. However, in support of going out to bid and the final plan set and bid documents have essentially been completed, so that has been wrapped up. The only change to the specifications might be if there's anything significant that's found during the subsurface explorations that might need to exclude certain areas, exclude the contractor from certain areas, and we would place those requirements in the bid documents before we go out to bid. So Village Parkway South, as you probably have noticed, if you've been out driving around, the project is essentially complete in terms of all the asphalt work. This month, the contractor will be completing the striping, signage, adding shoulder backing,
some guardrail and gates, bollards at various different areas, and hydroseeding some of the loose dirt areas. And that should all be complete this month, and we anticipate that project will be substantially complete by the 1st of June. At this time, we're scheduling a ribbon cutting or grand opening of the roadway for June 17th. So you may want to mark your calendars. On the general reevaluation report, if you've been watching the news or otherwise keeping track of what's going on in Washington, last month the final chief's report was executed for our report, for our project, and transmitted to Congress as well as the Assistant Secretary of the Army. Senate went to markup on their Water Resource Development Act bill, and in that markup included our project. So our project is now officially included in the Senate version of WRDA. Earlier this week, House T&I Committee held a hearing to hear 4 new projects to be considered for their version of WRDA. Ours was one of those 4 projects. They're going to mark up next Wednesday, and we anticipate our project being added to the House version of WRDA next week. And so I'll be reporting out next month, or perhaps by email, because it is good news, the results of the markup next Wednesday. So good progress towards authorization of that federal project. So we anticipate that our project will get authorized on WRDA 2016. It's very good news. On the problem identification report and alternatives analysis report, update on that is those reports have essentially been in the final draft status now. At last night's council meeting, staff presented an item on the draft adequate progress report to the City Council. They're required to make by July 1 of this year a finding that WSAFCA and the city are making adequate progress towards 200-year level of flood protection by 2025. The report was well received, and we'll be returning to the City Council on June 1 for them to actually make the findings by resolution. We plan to come back to the board in June to provide an update to you on the final update to the problem identification report and the final alternatives analysis report, where we are since those reports were first performed back in 2000. I think they were completed in 2008, 2009. So some things have changed since that time, obviously, with adoption of the urban levee design criteria, also with the publication of the federal project. So we need to circle back and review our levee system in light of those new developments. So we'll bring those results to you next month. As the board hopefully recalls, a couple of months ago you authorized the general manager to execute a memorandum of agreement with the agencies that participate in the Regional Flood Management Planning Group, Yolo County, Sutter County Water Agency, not Sutter County, I'm sorry, Solano County, SAFCA, WSAFCA. We entered into a memorandum of agreement to participate in the Sacramento River GRR. That agreement has been executed, and this Friday, the group is making a presentation to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board to formally ask or request that this group be added as an additional non-federal sponsor in the development of that Sacramento River General Reevaluation Report. So far, the communications have been very favorable and positive. That's what the feedback. So we anticipate their acknowledgement and agreement to that. Assuming that happens on Friday, we'll return in June for an actual item that would sort of approve that request, and then we would work with the Corps to get this agreement formalized.
Any feedback from the Corps as to their thoughts?
There's been some feedback, obviously not official feedback. Yeah. They're not opposed to having an additional non-federal sponsor. I think the details to be worked out is whether it's a 3-party federal agreement to add us as an additional non-federal sponsor, or whether the federal agreement stays as is between the Corps and the Flood Protection Board, and then the Flood Protection Board enters into a partnership agreement with the agencies. So those details still have to be worked out, but our request is going to be added as an additional third party to the federal agreement. And that's the same form of agreement that we had for the West Sacramento GRR.
Right.
And that's all that I had to report on the updates. I'd be happy to answer any other questions, either on what I've covered or other items in the report.
Anything?
No.
Any questions?
No, not on the report. I got one informational item, if you,
Pardon?
I got one informational item when you're done. When you're-
You have a-
Yeah, I just have just one informational item. I noticed in the paper today that the Amgen bike tour is coming through West Sacramento here, and they're going to be using South River Road, both northbound and southbound, this weekend. So the old road's going out with a bang. So you can get out, take a look at them. Come, I hope nobody goes off one side or the other. So, but anyhow, it'll be fun to watch.
Well, the new Village Parkway bicycle lane, is like a freeway, in my opinion. It's really wide.
Yep.
Being nothing else, the meeting's adjourned.